Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar, Digital Health by Default. Let me introduce myself. I'm Kathy Megyery, Vice President Policy at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, and I'll be moderating this session this afternoon. The global COVID seismic shift and scaling of digital technologies across the healthcare sector at a pace never seen before. Virtual care and the adoption of digital health platforms went from being extremely rare to digital by default. Almost overnight, organizations had to dial up their efforts to develop, to manufacture, and ultimately to bring technologies to patients in a socially distanced world. We've seen how data-driven decisions, the entire healthcare value, drive efficiencies and improve patient outcomes. This webinar will take a closer look at the acceleration and advancements of digital healthcare since the beginning of the pandemic, and we'll discuss the future of health innovation as it pertains to digital adoption and implementation opportunities for all the players involved. To discuss these digital developments and their impacts, we have the pleasure of having with us today 4 esteemed panelists covering the life sciences and technology sectors. With us today, we have Stéphanie Chicoine, Senior Healthcare Business Manager at Microsoft Canada, Laure Tessier-Delibuc, Client Solutions Director, Digital and Solutions GE Healthcare, Christian Macher, Country President and Oncology General Manager at Novartis Canada, and Ken Hughes, Chair of the Board of Providence Therapeutics. Welcome to all 4 of you, and thank you for joining us today. To start, Ken, and put a question to Ken, who again is Chair of the Board at Providence Therapeutics. Oh, by way of reminder to the audience, we will have a Q&A period at the end of this session. So if you want to join via slido.com, the number to enter is 430514. That's 430514. If you want to ask questions, we'll take them at the end of the session. So Ken, here's my question to you. The first doses of a COVID-19 vaccine were administered on December 14, 2020, about a year after the disease was first detected. Tested, FDA approved for emergency use, rapidly manufactured and safely delivered at sub-freezing temperatures. This was by any measure the fastest pathway to vaccination in human history. It is widely recognized that transformation technology has been a key enabler to the development and delivery of COVID-19 vaccines at such a rapid speed. In Canada, as it is well known, we did not have locally manufactured vaccines, but this is in the process of changing. Providence Therapeutics, of which you are the chair, is leveraged its expertise in oncology and personalized cancer therapies and is applying it to developing a coronavirus vaccine here in Canada. Can you tell us a little bit about Providence Therapy, the role that digital technology played in the development of the vaccine?
Sure. Thank you very much, Kathy. And I'd like to thank the Chamber for the opportunity to speak today on behalf of Providence. We are one story that is very consistent and representative of a lot of stories of how people have had to respond and chosen to respond to the pandemic of the last couple of years. In many ways, it really took a pandemic to force humans to overcome their natural resistance to change, to actually use the technology that we had. And then also push the boundaries on what technology we have in order to expand our capacity in a digital world. You know, I'll give you a bit of a personal story. 20 years ago, I was working with a company in Calgary. It was the Axia Cisco Microsoft proposal for an IP-based fiber optic network throughout the province of Alberta. We spent a lot of time at the time imagineering, how is this fiber going to be used? What are we going to do? What are the exciting opportunities that could be undertaken if you had fiber into every community, 430 some communities in the province? And how would that change life in both rural and urban communities? Well, remarkably, here we are today. And a lot of what we kind of dreamt up, we didn't dream it all up, but a lot of it is here. And people are really actually using that fiber throughout Alberta, not just Alberta, but throughout the world. But they're also using the digital platform that an IP platform enables. And so with respect to the biotech world, I'll give you a bit of background on Providence. We were a small biotech company that had raised less than $20 million. And it was a small but mighty band of very talented people who really understood messenger RNA and who were working on developing and were ready to go into clinical trials for cancer trials when COVID hit. And it was pretty clear we either were going to die or we had to figure out how to redeploy our technology and what we knew. And of course, the Scientific Advisory Board, which is again a very talented group of people with really impressive scientific backgrounds, said, you've got to pivot. You've got to look at what Moderna's doing, look at what BioNTech is doing. We've got the platform. And we were maybe a month and a half behind Moderna in terms of the pace at which we were moving. And it was all enabled by the fact that we actually had technologies that we could communicate with each other. The digital technologies, look at the rate from day one. We identify the variant, or in the case at the outset, the original native the original virus. Within days, you have a sequence of the genome. And then within days, if not a couple of weeks, you've figured out what you need to do in order to have a vaccine. And then you start constructing that. This is spectacular. This is just amazing human accomplishments to be able to do all that in like days and a few weeks to construct the essential elements so that then you can go on to scaling up and manufacturing and doing all the practical things you have to do and actually to do a clinical set of clinical trials. And that means you have to rely upon cloud technologies and AI, a tremendous amount. A lot of, obviously everybody's working remotely. I saw a presentation by the CFO of Moderna about 6 or 8 months into the pandemic, and he'd been hired in June, just in the first 6 months of the pandemic. He'd still not met anybody in person in Moderna as the CFO 6 months later. And to think that you could actually do that, you bring somebody in brand new to the industry, and he is running an operation like that with the American government is throwing billions of dollars at them, and he hasn't met anybody in person. That's an amazing thing that we've all been through. Our clinical trials, we're now into phase 2 of our clinical trials. We did everything as much as possible in preparing for phase 1, remotely. And even in terms of business development, I think the most striking thing I can say is that Providence did a business development transaction with a company based primarily in the People's Republic of China, but elsewhere as well. $500 million is effectively the value of the transaction. And we never once had a face-to-face conversation with people. And when you think about the cultural barriers, the cultural distance, but it was all based upon, there were people who knew each other in the two companies and knew each other well for 10 or 20 years from the messenger RNA business. So, if you've got the trust and the relationship already established, you could do anything. And so that's really a little bit of background about Providence. We have lots of opportunity in front of us. We are working very closely with a number of partners in order to expand our reach. We have very promising results from our clinical trials that indicate we have every reason to believe that it's a world-class messenger RNA vaccine of a similar quality of BioNTech and Moderna. And we've been able to do it in the middle of all of this. As a small company, we're now 50 people. We'll be 100 people within the next year. We have Northern RNA, which is a manufacturer that's been stood up in Calgary to manufacture important rare constituent parts for messenger RNA. And they're doing the same thing we are. We've been supported tremendously by suppliers, particularly out of Quebec, with the clean room technology. And so this is going to be, when people look back, it's a great Canadian success story, and we will have the strategic capacity to respond to variants, to change the message in our messenger RNA vaccines, and we will have the opportunity to work with other players as well, with applying messenger RNA to other platforms as well, to other diseases. So like this is pretty cool. It's pretty exciting, and it's a great Canadian story.
It's just a quick question. So what are your projections now for completing the trials and seeking approval? And my other question is, will this vaccine be mainly for international markets which have not yet received?
Yeah, so we're into phase 2. We'll be completing phase 2 within a couple of months, where we'll have the data back, and then move into phase 3 clinical trial. We also have some other opportunities which I can't really speak of at this point, but which might help speed up the process. But our primary market will be those countries that today are underserved by, the Pfizers and Modernas of the world. And, we can see that they have a pricing model which supports their financial strategy. Our view is we're here to actually solve a pandemic, and we are going to price at a level that actually makes it possible that countries that today can't afford Moderna and Pfizer, they will be able to afford Providence. And we're not big pharma, with all due respect to big pharma, and we think that we can change the model, and we're all about messenger RNA for the people, for actually achieving the goal of eliminating a pandemic. That's where we're coming from.
Ken, that's very inspiring. I'm going to turn to you next, Christian. Just a reminder again, you're country president and oncology general manager for Novartis Canada. So my question is the following: the pandemic has shown us that we must grasp the clear opportunities, pairing of data science and technology to not only reshape the life sciences sector, but also to create better experiences for patients and physicians. At a time when it still takes some 12 years and over $2 billion to bring a drug to market, it has never been so critical to leverage advances in data and technology. Novartis and Microsoft recently released Reimagining Global Health through AI. So my question to you is, why is AI so important for the future of our approach to global health? What will change? What applications are you most excited about? But please, before, perhaps just say a few words about Novartis's activities in Canada.
Absolutely. Again, Kathy and the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, super excited to be here with you today, because I think we are at a critical juncture where science, technology, and data science are coming together in a unique way, which will allow us to work smarter and develop new medicines much faster. And as a corporation with Novartis, we are on a journey to becoming a more data-centric organization. I would say that we don't really longer want to be a pharmaceutical company, but move towards a health tech company. And that means fundamentally transforming the way we deliver the science, from a drug discovery standpoint, on how we improve operational excellence to ultimately provide a more personalized and customer and patient-centric experiences that will allow us to address kind of the health gaps. And for that, we started to have more and more meaningful partnerships with institutions and organizations who can help us to get there. And we've gone that far to kind of relocate our head office to be closer to the ecosystem where we're operating in. And what you see in my background here, that's how our new office will look like in downtown Montreal, because we feel it's important that we are embedded in the stakeholders and the partners we operate with. We want to rub shoulders with the ecosystem, being opposite the Schim Hospital in Montreal and down the road, a bike ride away from the buzzing AI ecosystem in the Plateau of Montreal. And we think that only together we can solve the challenges of the healthcare in the future. But coming back to your question, where you were asking around the partnership with Microsoft. In fact, in 2019, this was when we started this strategic partnership of this AI Innovation Lab, and it centers around the drug discovery for patients in kind of augmenting our scientists with cutting edge technology platform. I would say it's a drug discovery enhanced by AI. And the idea is pretty simple. I think we want to cut down the timelines by really using AI to run the thousands of experiments that a chemist needs to do every day much faster and simultaneously, and really analyze all the data. And I'm a chemist by training myself, and it's pretty much like multiplying yourself in the lab and doing 1,000 things at the same time. So I think that's kind of the big idea. To ultimately, that will lead to a faster and a more productive drug pipeline. And just imagine the impact that will have on the patients as we are researching on many drugs and disease areas where we don't yet have a solution. So I think the impact of that collaboration will potentially be tremendous. But I also want to highlight a second example on how we're using data and technology, which goes beyond the drug development. We recently announced a partnership between Inodem Neuroscience to fund a clinical trial in MS, in multiple sclerosis, where we're using their AI-powered eye tracking software to capture and analyze eye movement biomarkers and gaze mapping biomarkers to simply help physicians to better diagnose and monitor the disease progression. I find it absolutely fascinating. You can do this with an app technology practically to really monitor and diagnose that disease. And last but not least, another example on how we're really using AI and technology is to pivot the operation and the structure of our clinical trials that we're running. As you can imagine, during the height of the pandemic, we all had to conduct the monitoring and the oversight of clinical trials virtually. And that provided a tremendous learning platform to really finesse the way on how we do this moving forward. And so we are now exploring if we can do this on a more permanent basis. So 3 great examples, great partnership with Microsoft, really practical ways on how we can enhance patient care, diagnosis, and monitoring. And last but not least, the execution of clinical trials are kind of 3 areas on how we are really accelerating the way we use data and digital within Novartis.
Yeah, very inspiring, and obviously great news for patients who are awaiting treatments to know that these treatments will be coming faster. I'm very impressed by this beautiful building behind you, Christian, in hometown and my favorite part of Montreal. So I'd maybe ask you a follow-up question, which is, what do you think the competitive advantages of Montreal, or more broadly Canada, are in the area of AI and more generally data analytics?
I think, you know, the great benefits are that Canada is already looking back at a very impressive history of achievements in kind of life sciences. And I'm also pleased recently the federal government is investing in biomanufacturing and in the life science strategy as a whole. So I think really the framework is there. And then when I look particularly zooming in at Montreal, I sit, for example, on the board of Montreal In Vivo, and it's an organization that facilitates the mobilization and the cross collaboration among the life science cluster. And I think the city is having a very skilled workforce already, and there is the commitment from all the players there to kind of really make this happen. Again, the example, the AI hotspot with the Montreal Institute of Learning Algorithms, run by a Turing Prize winner, Yoshua Benju. So there are many examples of why Canada and specifically Montreal is of high relevance. And that was one of the reasons why we've established what we call a digital innovation hub, the Novartis Biome. And it's a unique kind of healthcare research collaboration with a goal to really provide better tools and experiences for doctors, for care providers, and ultimately for the patients to have a positive impact on the patient journey from diagnosis to treatment. And one example I want to use here is of a recent collaboration with AliveCore technology. That's the first partnership we have here with Oncology locally, coming out of the Biome. We're using a distant electrocardiogram testing with a specialized app. And this project will enable access to this electrocardiogram for breast cancer patient. And ultimately, since the results will be transmitted to a web portal to the treated physician, that will likely remove the need for additional visits of the patients and therefore reduce waiting times and speed and ease and how to do things. So you know, I was starting broader, why Canada, why Montreal, the Biome, and then some very specific examples on how with an app are already trying to kind of make things happen. So very excited with like the prospects, and we hope that will further accelerate once we enter our new site here, where we're basically, you know, as I said at the beginning, a bike ride away, and can rub shoulders with all the critical partners to kind of co-create solutions to have a positive impact on the patient journey. So that's the plan.
That's great, Christelle. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn now to Laure. Laure is Client Solutions Director, Digital and Solutions at GE Healthcare. So Laure, Christelle said a lot of things, and maybe will inspire some of your own comments. My question is, like, if we turn now from biopharma to medical technologies, GE Health obviously is a world leader in medical technologies and diagnostics. So tell us a little bit about the offerings GE has chosen to support, to bring to market in order to help patients, healthcare providers, and health systems generally.
Okay, thank you, Kathy, and thank you to the Chamber for allowing me to be part of this very esteemed panel here. So thank you. GE Healthcare, for those that might not know us in healthcare, we provide medical devices, so your CTs, your MR, your ultrasound, life care solution, that's the physiological monitoring. We've got pharmaceutical diagnostics and also digital health solutions. So like Christian, artificial intelligence is at the heart of everything we look at to improve care. And we've got an intelligent platform to do that, that allows our engineers to design products that really can not only innovate, but really improve patient care, provide greater efficiency within the system, and increase access to care, not only for our product, but also partnering within the ecosystem together with startups to integrate their solution within ours. They move a lot faster than we can sometimes. So what we discovered during the pandemic is that it has highlighted really the importance of data, and Christian was talking about it, to inform decision making. And we've got so much data in healthcare and we don't use it in the ways we should. So I wanted to highlight that through a success story that happened with one of our customers during the pandemic. So on March 14th, 2020, a mission control executive from Oregon Health and Science University woke up with a great idea. It's like, why wouldn't I connect all the hospitals in the state together so that I can look at beds available across that state, ventilators available across that state, and then can really manage my patient load. Luckily, we were working with them. So they have what we call our command center. If you think about an airport control tower for airplane, think about the command center in that way. So our team really looked at how we could use data and real-time artificial intelligence to really inform care and look at capacity across the system. Challenge number one, so I'll hit you with a bunch of numbers: 60 hospitals, 40 electronic medical records, 7,368 beds, 800 ventilators, meaning 4.2 million of data points each day. Challenge number two, how do we convince competing health systems to share data, right? Because they are kind of frenemies, right? They compete, but they want to be friends. So nonetheless, within a day, we had a plan that they managed to drive the politics internally in the state to move forward. And within 2 weeks, we had 90% of the hospitals in the state were sharing data points. So think about that airport departure, arrival, electronic board, but with beds and ventilators, right? So the compelling aspect of the story here is not only how quickly such a complex initiative was put in place, but how really competing healthcare system came together to share data with each other for the greater good. So I heard Ken, you talk about the greater good, right? And it is important, I think, moving forward, that we liberate that data to be used for the greater good by all institutions, private company, multinationals, startups.
Sorry, I muted myself. Thanks very much. I'm going to ask you a follow-up question, but if anybody else wants to jump in, I mean, I think it's a very worrisome question for all of us. When we look at the healthcare system, it's been clearly very much dominated by the pandemic for the last 2 years, with the consequence that, you know, there are diagnostics and surgeries which are, you know, very severely delayed in all parts of the country, if we speak about Canada. So can you, Laure, and if anybody else wants to jump in on that, tell us a little bit about what some of the solutions, or how GE Healthcare might be able to propose certain solutions to alleviate, you know, these delays that we're now facing in diagnostics and in surgeries.
Yeah, if you look at the challenge, it started before the pandemic, right? I mean, the increased demand on healthcare starting way before that is the baby boom, right? With chronic health and chronic diseases skyrocketing. But the pandemic has basically exponentially increased that wait list, right? In MRI, and Christian was just chatting with me, the application of the solution in Oregon to imaging, and I'm coming to it, Christian. So in MRI and CT wait list, surgery, because necessarily surgery comes after medical diagnostic. So if you have a delay in the medical diagnostic, you've got an impact to surgery, you've got an impact in oncology. So it's a downstream event, right? And patients are more involved, more engaged. I don't know about you, but I want to interact with healthcare in the way I go to the bank, in the way I travel. And the demand is clear. So this pushes us as an industry to constantly innovate, right? And again, reemphasizes the importance of unlocking that data, connecting the silos. And again, for the greater good, because at the end, who benefits? Yes, the companies grow, but the patient experience, the patient care, and in oncology, their survival. So AI, I mean, Christian was pretty clear. It's not just a buzzword, right? It's real. It's there. You use it every day. You map your route to see your friends. You use it. You watch Netflix. You use it. It will, and it is revolutionizing the way we care for patients today, and even more tomorrow. So I talked about, real-time AI in connecting all those data points to improve patient flow, right? Some hospitals, a lot of them outside of Canada, in the US, have developed those command center in full scale. It's that, tower of control for the hospital. Humber River, one of our customer, has done that, was able to virtually increase their number of beds without creating building new infrastructure, and without hiring more staff. It was just a matter of streamlining workflow, and also saved money along the way, by the way. So that's that. Again, we want to do more with less every day. And I think data plus AI is a great combo to do that. What we do with AI too is that we integrate it in the image reconstruction chain. So AI can help with building images in a way that you basically kick out the noise before it comes to the image. And what this allows to do is really to decrease the duration of an MRI scan in MRI. I don't know if many of you have had an MRI. It's not a super pleasant experience. You get into a tiny tunnel. It lasts 40 minutes to an hour. It is super noisy and it's chilly. You don't want to be in there too long. And luckily, if you have an MRI, it's because you have a condition. So shortening that MRI will help with obviously patient experience, but also shorten that exam, which allows to increase patients' throughput, decrease the wait list, assess a patient fast enough that they can get diagnosed and treated or get into surgery. We do a bit of the same in CT. In this case, it's more to decrease dose to patient, right? The purpose here is CT exams are relatively short, so this is not the point, but you don't want to send too many X-ray and radiation at a patient. So this is to kind of decrease that dose to patient. And then as Christian was talking, the concept of the organ expediter tile, if I may call it, or dashboard in imaging and surgery, it's been, and it's in the process of being implemented. It has huge potential to help us catch up on that backlog and get patients diagnosed and treated as fast as possible. So now let me go to other trends I see appearing from a technology perspective that are going to help. Virtual reality, right? Augmented reality. What if I'm a surgeon and I'm operating on a patient and I can layer their X-ray on top of their body as I do my surgery, right? Wearables and sensors, they're going to exponentially increase those number of data points, informing healthcare practitioner with AI, what can we achieve for that patient, connecting wellness with health and avoiding for patient to even get into the hospital. Robotics, 3D printing, all this. And maybe one day, I don't know, I'd like to believe, I don't know how many of you are Star Trek fans, but that medical tricorder where you sit in front of your mirror in the morning, it's doing a scan of your body and it's assessing out your vitals. And it's going to tell you, hey, you're due for that checkup because you should check on that. So if some of you are interested, we did a little video. It's getting older already, believe it or not. It's called Meet Sophie. And it was our vision in 2020 of what healthcare might be in 2030. And that medical tricorder, it looks a lot better than it's Star Trek, but it might be there in 2030. Who knows?
Thanks very much, Laure. Christian has a very interesting question. I'm going to go to Stephanie, and then I'll ask the question, or I'll let Christian ask his question, because I think Stephanie and Ken may also want to respond, but I want to make sure that Stephanie has a chance to talk to us a little bit. So Stephanie, I remind everybody, she's Senior Healthcare Business Manager at Microsoft Canada. So the question to you, Stephanie, is Microsoft really continues to be a staple name in nearly every industry, has been heavily recently, well, not so recently, investing generally in healthcare offerings. As healthcare increasingly emphasizes efficiency and is becoming more receptive to technology, your company is rapidly expanding its presence in the field. So again, can you tell us about some of the priority area where Microsoft has been introducing new offerings?
Yep, absolutely. And thanks everyone in the chamber for having me. This panel has been so interesting. I get the benefit of going last and kind of hearing everybody, which is nice. But, you know, I kind of just based on, you know, what was discussed, there's some really great examples out of Christian and Laura about, you know, on the life sciences side and our partnership with Novartis, and what that, you know, mass computing at scale, reducing a timeline to sequence a genome, you know, who's hosting that? Who's the platform securing it? That's kind of where Microsoft plays in that space. It's offering the tools so that an organization can go do the things that they want to do. And in the healthcare space, and specifically in that use case, it's as fast as possible without having this huge overhead of managing a data center, right? So it's cloud, it's outsourcing that whole operation side. So you can just focus on doing the thing you're really great at, that core competency of that organization. And then in Laura's case, what you brought up around, you know, connecting data. And I was like, oh man, just thinking about, yeah, the competition and sharing data and what are the blockers to interoperability? I saw that question come up. From a technical point of view and kind of like speaking as a technologist and doing this, you know, a lot in my career is like the technical kind of steps. If you were to read a doc, you know, on how to do data interoperability, you could do it. It's getting everybody to play together and actually want to do it and setting a data standard and, you know, breaking kind of open and being open-minded to these new things and these new systems of healthcare, while being, you know, risk adverse, but accepting the risks that we face as we kind of move into this digital age. And with the pandemic, you know, still ongoing, we saw kind of the forced action of having to light up that whole experience online really quickly and forcing really the hand of, hey, you're gonna have to come here, put, you know, health data online, start meeting virtually, and thinking about how you're going to store, host, secure all of this patient information. You thought you had 10 years, you have about, you know, 1 month, right? Maybe 2 weeks. So it was, you know, pretty shocking. A lot of late nights for us, obviously with teams, for sure. But in terms of Microsoft in this space, specifically, I've only been at Microsoft for about 4 years. I'm from EMR and, you know, was in life sciences and pharma for a while too, and in the application side. And I've seen a huge industry pivot at Microsoft myself since I started in kind of the Canadian cloud space with healthcare. Obviously, kind of the biggest financial proof of that recently is that acquisition of Nuance, one of the largest acquisitions Microsoft's ever done. Again, you're seeing kind of like that AI story, that text-to-speech medical lexicon story take place with that acquisition. We have the Microsoft Cloud for Healthcare, right? So, you know, when Microsoft kind of comes to market with an offering, it's enabling line of business applications in a secure kind of foundation that actually puts our partner organizations in the hands of the end customer, which could be a nurse or, you know, any kind of care practitioner, right? We play in the virtual health space with HoloLens. We play in virtual care with Teams. We play in patient monitoring and care coordination. So mixed reality, the, you know, field is kind of endless for us. But I would say the thing that I get to see that is really exciting in this role is where, because Microsoft's this big global organization, you get to see all, and you know, lots of everyone here really is, but get to see kind of where countries are at in comparison to each other pretty frequently. And, you know, kind of how far Canada has come, you know, projects specifically even I've worked on in the last 2 years have been, you know, things that I never really even thought maybe, hey, I won't see them in my career, right? So it's been very transformational. In different countries, we're seeing, you know, how we looking at quantum, how we looking at that real, you know, Christian kind of touched on today, prescriptive medication and care path when it comes to oncology. Can you test 150 different drug types against my biopsy? And can you do it in 3 hours and then upload those results to my oncologist so I'm ready for my appointment next week? All of that is possible. It's, you know, having the velocity and the excitement and kind of the openness to want and go do it and set it up. And that's really, I think, where, you know, Microsoft is and is always going to want to be. That's literally in the mission statement there is empowering organizations and people to do more. And that's really what it is. So it's all over the place in terms of specific technologies. But I would say if I had to kind of summarize and look at an all-up view, it's that empowerment space is where Microsoft's really strong and thinking about, you know, kind of holding up some of those core foundational pieces. So all these organizations we work with can, you know, that are best in class in their area, go do that specific thing.
Super. So I think it's very timely now to come maybe to Christian's question, and I'm going to link a second one to it. You know, we're hearing about the extraordinary things that, you know, data will allow us to do. And Stephanie, I really like the way you put the empowerment of the patient, because we know today data is the custodian of data is much more the healthcare professional than the patient, you know, which you know is a long way from the dream that you're putting forward, or that new reality. So two of the big barriers that we hear often is, Christian mentioned the interoperability of the data across different systems. So I'd like to hear you on that. Laura, you talked a lot about that in the States. It seems to work somewhat better than Canada, or maybe that's just my impression. And the other one is the fact, again, I come back to sort of the who owns the data, who protects the data. We've been in Canada generally very concerned about the safety of data, and rightly so, and so on. But how do we ensure the protection of individual health data, but at the same time leverage some of these amazing opportunities that, you know, the technology is allowing us to do? So I throw that out to the entire panel. Put up your hand, or just go whoever wants to go first. Christian, I saw you unmuted your microphone, so maybe you'd like to respond.
Yeah, look, maybe just to kind of reinforce also the background of my question. I think that the challenge of this interoperability remains significant, also linked to the data connection, and I think there should be a focus on collaboration. So I'm curious to understand, Laura, on how you did that, and Stephanie on how you can help bringing the systems together. But I think there's also a policy element to it, because we need to respect the data privacy. That's paramount. And when it's about medical data, it is even more important. So I think all these elements need to come together to then fully unleash the power of AI, because what AI needs is a big pool of synchronized data to find these patterns, right? So you know, I don't have the answer, more the plea for we need to work together on one hand to make it work among us, because we're all owning a piece of, let's call it the patient journey, from diagnosis to medication to kind of the data background, and at the same time a plea to the policymakers to kind of generate the platform so that can be done. So not a solution, but I know on whom I need to work with, and I'm curious if one of you already had made some advances here.
Go ahead, Laura.
So Kathy, maybe I can speak a little bit to how we do those command center, because you're totally right, Christian. The first, the interoperability and gathering data from all those systems and silos, it can still be a lot of work. This being said, you know, there are standards. So Stephanie was talking about those, right? And the scope of HL7, health level 7, fire, DICOM that we can leverage. And this being said, there is still a lot of pieces of that mapping and normalization of data that can be very manual. So we still have engineers focused on this project because, as you said, Christian, there are certain areas where data is not standard and is not normalized. So it's a lot of effort in some cases to do those big projects. In the case of Oregon, the privacy of the data the privacy of the patient was not a concern because we were looking at bed and ventilator. So there was really no patient identity per se. And in those command center, a lot of the solutions are not based on patient and their ID, but patient flow. So that allows to leverage data and really harness that data without the risk of that patient ID and patient health identification challenge. So that's what makes command center and that integration fairly easy, providing that first step being that data is digital, because you wouldn't believe the number of data points that are still not digital in Canada, right? And that is the first step. I think the slow adoption of those technologies in Canada is because we still have a lot of hospitals across the country that document in an analog or paper format. So until that data is structured and digital, we can't really go very far.
Stephanie?
I was just going to build on that point, Lauren, about specifically security as it pertains to healthcare data. And of course, we have to be cautious and careful and risk adverse, but it doesn't mean we can't work together. This kind of cyber threat right now is super sophisticated. However, every major bank is online. It's how can we look at other industries with extremely sensitive data and mimic their policies and what they've done and work together in that way? And just that kind of piece about paper, I sometimes bring up this example, but the fax machine pile and the doorknob not lock is not a security system, right? So just because we were doing it one way means we need to think about how we bring that lock and key, which is ironic that we go and name it key vault and have all these kind of security policies around, but it is possible. It's really just about saying, hey, this kind of scary place out here in digital can be a place where we can keep patient data, we can keep it securely, but let's work with the right industry partners, security best in class vendors in our community to just be sure we're doing it correctly, right? And I think I wouldn't want to see policy and risk aversion become such an overwhelming concern that we do nothing in this space as Canadians and as far as data interoperability goes. So it is something that comes up a lot, that's for sure.
Kathy, if I can chip in here, I was the founding chair of Alberta Health Services for nearly 4 years, and one of the things that we were very ambitious about early on was being able to create a single healthcare record for individuals as patients in Alberta. And, we had 50 databases, and it took years longer than we thought it would. All of these issues are important issues. I think that we can point to the developments around a QR code as an example of something where stuff actually worked. People really got this working across the country. We can do it if we have to. And, just to get your QR code to prove that you've got your vaccines is an example of where it's really worked, I think, pretty well everywhere. It's complicated and it's not always 100%, and there are exceptions. And, every province had to kind of build it from ground up, it would appear. But there is an example of where people were able to actually deliver on a real need and cut through the nonsense that usually constrains good maneuvers like this because of the pandemic. I mean, in part, it can be There are forces of resistance when you're trying to create change in healthcare. The professionals are not immune from being sources of resistance. You look at doctors' offices, they're not completely with the picture in terms of digital data availability and making that available internally. It's getting much, much better than it was, but it's been a big fight, and it's not easy. And so, in many ways, the pandemic has, as tragic as it has been for so many people, it's forced people to actually use tools that we have access to for the betterment of society. I mean, two good things come out of the pandemic. One, we validated messenger RNA as a platform that will have an impact that will outlive all of us, and be a really positive force for the health of humanity. And secondly, we force people to actually work with tools that we have available to us that can actually cut through the nonsense and deliver better healthcare to citizens.
Well, Ken, you have two people in the chat agreeing wholeheartedly with the advanced approach that Alberta took. So clearly your message was very well received by two of our members of our audience. Maybe
by three, Kathy. I just didn't put it in the chat. Yeah, there are other provinces that you and I know might be a little in different spots.
Yeah, exactly. That's the Canadian reality of our provincial system. We are now open for questions. I have received two. There's one that you guys have partially answered, but I do want to read it to you anyway in case there's something you want to add in terms of the digitalization of healthcare on our OHIP cards. In this case, the person must be from Ontario. How will our health history be tracked? So, I mean, it's sort of more about, I think the person is perhaps referring to putting the patient again at the center of the ownership of this data. But do you have any comments about the fact that, a person would own all their health data through this digitalization process? Any additional comments?
So, Kathy, I'm aware of some of the activities going on in Ontario around that really patient-centric, right, record, which is similar to, I'm originally from France, very, very much in line with what France did. So, and I can't speak to where Ontario will land or how fast, right? But in France, where I'm from, this is how it works. Everything is attached to that card and your number. And the beauty is wherever you go, you do have access to your record. But in my country of origin, I'm custodian of my own healthcare data. So when I first came to North America, actually, the challenge for me was, what do you mean I don't get a copy of my x-ray? What do you mean I have to pay for it, right? So is it gonna get here? There are certainly examples. I think someone mentioned it in the chat earlier about example of evolution around the world, and particularly in Europe, where they have found solutions, right, to that the custody of the data and the access to the data for the better good. And we ought to look at that as Canadians, to look at what best practices exist out there that could apply to Canada, and how could we customize them to fit our landscape, right? But there's certainly opportunities. So I don't know if that answered the question from this gentleman or lady around OHIP, but that's how it could work, yes.
Okay, so we do have one other question around what are sort of the policy areas or policy solutions that, would be sort of the quick wins that we could tap into to really leverage digital and really close the care gaps for patients in the healthcare systems? Go ahead, Christian.
I think the first piece would be to just encourage the governments and in general healthcare providers in the provinces to be more open to agile solutions. I think we've heard during the course of this webinar many examples which are unfortunately still kind of at a pilot stage. So if we can generate kind of an openness to kind of adopt these models and the delivery, because that ultimately will encourage kind of a broader and faster access to these solutions, I think is kind of one way, right? Another way would be, and I'm now make a comment like a little broader. I think we need to reward the life science and the innovation behind all of this in Canada as much as we can, because we all know all these inventions are brainchilds, and these solutions can travel anywhere. They don't necessarily need to be developed here in this country. So if we want to make sure that Canada remains a hotspot for that, and it has all the ingredients, as I said earlier, we need to make sure that there is a certain level of reward and framework that encourages that to be developed. So that would be kind of the two areas that I would go, make sure there is an agility in the system to adapt new ways, and making sure that there is a reward for the innovation that is generated.
Thank you. Laura?
And I think, the pandemic has created a thrive for innovation that I haven't seen in before. And I think the lessons to learn from the pandemic is, do we truly need a crisis to rally around solving the biggest problem the healthcare system has? How do we learn to have the agility, as Christian said, that we can have with a cloud of a crisis on top of us, but use that all the time moving forward and don't lose that momentum? And indeed, give a chance to those innovators that have bright ideas to go beyond the pilot. We've got pilotism in Canada, or often, right? We will try one thing and stops there. It doesn't go any further. So those are the two lessons from the pandemic. Keep the momentum going without the threat, right? And then just stop the pilotism and go forward and adopt the solution and measure in the end, measure the impact. And you know what? If it didn't impact positively, drop it. Fail early, move on, right? Yeah.
Stephanie, any last thoughts on what we learned from the pandemic that could help us move forward?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to steal Ken's example or reiterate it, where, this like QR codes, I think they were hot like 10 years ago or something, right? And in print, right? And it's like, but it worked, and it was easy, and it's cheap, and it worked for everybody, and everybody just kind of got it, and it's part of our life now. And it doesn't have to be this big daunting mountain, right? We can chip away at these pieces, we can think differently, we can be creative. And who would have thought, a couple years ago that we'd all have this screenshot of a QR code on our phone, and that was just our pass at the airport, and it worked. And it just worked, right? So these things that are so simple, like that, beauty and simplicity, are how we can really start to look at a lot of these healthcare issues. Not all of them might be like that, but at least we can start trying and getting creative. And it doesn't have to be millions or billions of dollars to get there either.
Law, last word.
Yeah, and feeding off that, Stephanie, I think the new entrants are going to revolutionize healthcare. The people that are taking things that are done, like, when did you scan your QR code to get on an airplane? You had your boarding pass on your phone. Well, it came to healthcare. So the new entrants that are coming from other sectors are going to come with those crazy ideas. Why wouldn't you do this in healthcare? And we need to let them try. We really do.
Thank you very much. Well, we're heading up to 2 o'clock. It's been really, really fascinating. I mean, time has really flown. I had all these backup questions, but I mean, you guys just were an amazing panel. So to Stephanie, Laure, Christian, and Ken, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thanks, everyone.